All right. Welcome everybody to our fifth mentor career panel. So thank you for attending so much. And we have two mentors from Team 1967, the Janksters, Mr. Labonville and Mr. Wolff. And we also have two mentors from Cupertino High School, which will be Mr. Howland. And unfortunately, Mr. Mintz is on his own home way from work, so he might be coming a little late. So first, please introduce yourselves, what your career is, and what is it about? And please mention your role in the FRC team as well. I'll start off with Mr. Labonville.
Hello, my name is Gerry Labonville. I am an electrical engineer at Intuitive Surgical. We make the Da Vinci surgical robot. I manage a group of electrical engineers that design motion control and power boards for the moving parts. I guess, what else? Is that about what you wanted?
Yes.
Okay.
Next up is Mr. Wolff.
Hi there, my name is Bob Wolff, and I'm a software engineer and a hardware engineer in sort of a broad sense. My career has kind of been about pushing boundaries in the areas of digital video and how people might use digital video in their solutions, whether it's some high-tech thing, which was kind of earlier in my career, or these days, something that's much more practical. My career today is about helping to bring solutions to complex problems to cable companies and how to teach sort of old set-top boxes new tricks. So if you've got an old set-top box that doesn't know how to do cool things like Disney Plus and HBO Max, our products can help to do that in the cloud and bring it down to the old, not so smart set-top box.
Nice, nice.
And my focus in the Janksters for the last dozen years or so has been in the software realm more than in the hardware realm.
Very interesting. Great answer. Next up is Mr. Howland.
Hi, I'm Steve Howland. I'm a mentor for 2473, the Gold Strikers. I work at Johnson & Johnson in our robotics and digital solutions group. It's kind of an early group. We're still very developmental, but I am a systems integration engineer there. So I get to do a little bit of everything from some of our laboratory work with our surgeons and with our development system to basically chasing down a lot of problems and make sure that the hardware and software and everything works smoothly together. From a mentoring perspective, I've been with this team for several years. I was a student back when I was in high school on my own FRC team back in Connecticut. And I generally focus on hardware, and I'm also the drive coach.
Nice, great answers so far. So moving on to the next question. What led you to choose your career and what did it take to get there? So I will start us off with Mr. Wolff, please.
Sure thing. So I think for me, I've always been fascinated by computers. Kind of started when I was 10, trying to teach myself BASIC and led into just kind of putting in the magical 10,000 hours that it takes to kind of really become professional and adept at what you're doing. And really how to make them do innovative things. Pushing boundaries and solving puzzles was always a big thing for me. And so that means it takes time to tinker with and to play with and to puzzle things out. And I think when people have asked me what makes a great engineer, I think a lot of times it's that curiosity. It's the sort of the puzzle thing. If you hate puzzles, then you probably aren't going to really like so much about engineering.
Great. Yeah, I really liked how you put the analogy with puzzles in engineering, because there's lots of puzzles in engineering and software everywhere, especially when you're creating a new program and there's some kind of small bug. You gotta find that last missing puzzle piece.
Right, you got to tease that out of there somewhere, and that's it can either be something that's joyful, a little frustrating, but joyful in the end, or it's something that's frustrating and is really defeating, right? And how you sort of ingest that, right, and how that gets embodied for you personally, says a lot about not really about who you are, but about the type of person that either works well or doesn't work well with solving those kinds of problems. And so I always say to every year to my students, I say, I'm not here to teach you to be a software engineer. I'm here to help you find out if you like or hate being a software engineer, right? And it's really great to find out that you hate something before you go to college to do that and commit to it, right? So it's a wonderful thing to weed things out and then find out what you do like as to what's left on the table.
Right. And then next up will be Mr. Labonville.
Okay, so ever since I can remember, I've always been interested in tinkering with things, taking things apart, seeing how they worked. And a lot of times people were surprised that when I put it back together, I didn't have leftover pieces and they actually still worked and things like that. So I've always thought that I wanted to be an electrical engineer. The one time I remember that I kind of deviated from that was when I was in high school and they had the 11th grade, career talking thing. And I thought, well, maybe being a veterinarian would be nice. But then when I got to 12th grade, I changed back to electrical engineer. And, when I graduated, I went right into college to study that. One of the things that really helped me with that was taking shop classes. I went to a public school in San Diego and they had regular shop classes. And, it seemed kind of disappointing that a lot of schools now don't have the shop classes like I enjoyed. However, I see that FRC is really a pretty close substitute. And, the kids are doing a lot more with building things, the skills that you learned in the shop classes, but there's also the competition and there's really high technology involved in it. So, and also when I was going to college, I got a job working at a car electronics place. This was back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, where CB radios were a big thing. And so I got, radio experience, working on cars, doing all that stuff, all the practical things that go into building the robots now, crimping wires, making connections, troubleshooting, all that stuff. So, and then I just got into the electrical engineering even before I graduated. I had an industry job during my last semester of my senior year.
Nice, great answer. And for next up will be Mr. Mintz. So I know you were a little bit late. That's all right. So our question is, what led you to choose your career and what did it take to get there?
Sure. So first off, I'm Jacob. I work at Lockheed. I've been there about a little over 5 years now. And I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo for aerospace engineering. But I don't know, when I was really small, I remember wanting to be a scientist, and I had barely ever even heard of engineering. I thought engineering was like a train conductor. And I found out that engineering is, scientists, but you get to build stuff. You get to like create things. And so when I was applying for schools, I ended up applying to the same school that my sister went to. And I got recommended to try the materials engineering program. And it started off really good, really cool, small discipline at the time. It's really blown up since then, because every single industry needs a materials engineer person to help them figure out what's actually going to make the thing work. But I found after the first year that I really didn't want to do chemistry. I wanted something that I can like put my hands on and understand, picture in my mind, because chemistry is very like molecular level, and materials engineering was going to be a lot of that. And so I was debating between doing mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering. And I almost by the flip of a coin, I went with aerospace. I think both would have been fine. I've enjoyed aerospace. It was funny because most of the people in aerospace with that program with me could identify an airplane by the sound of it and had been flying RC planes since they were 5. But it was a really cool experience. We learned a lot of really fun things. It's funny, you learn like aerodynamics, and there's actually very few aerospace engineers that get to do aerodynamics. But you get to learn about it, and you get to learn, you get to put together a little glider, and you get to make a little rocket, and You get to see how these, how hyperjets work, like really, really cool stuff. A lot of work, but really fun. And then I graduated, and I spent a couple of years at home, actually. That's pretty common these days. Kind of looking for the right job for me, looking for something in aerospace, something maybe in mechanical. And a couple of years later, I found my way into Lockheed Martin, and I've been doing systems engineering with them since, which is very similar to aerospace. The thing about aerospace engineering is it's a really, really complex system, and it's hard for one person to know everything that's going on. And so you have to have these people that help bring in all these different parts and make sure that they're working together. And it becomes a really big deal knowing how to document and how to track interfaces between different subsystems. So a subsystem is, something like you have an electrical team and you have a mechanical team and you have a software team. That's pretty typical on an FRC robot. And making sure that those teams work together is huge. And it gets even more complicated when you have a huge system like a spacecraft or an airplane. And so that's part of what my job is. Another part that when you get to these really complex systems is important is requirements and verification. And that's basically, you're going to sell this to a customer. Often with Lockheed, it's to the government. And they want an airplane that goes this high and it goes this fast and it has to use these type of motors. And to prove all that, you have to, do a lot of tests, do a lot of analyses. You have to write it down and present it to them in a way that they can say, oh yeah, I believe you. And when I send it up into space, it's not going to blow up right when we do that. Because you don't want something, everything has to have a 99.999% workability. If you have an iPhone and there's a tiny glitch on it, it's not too hard to go to the store and swap it out for another one, or install a new update. But when you send something into space, it's a little bit harder to do that. So oftentimes we spend a lot of time making sure not only does it work most of the time, but it works nearly 100% of the time. And so that's a lot of what I do, just making sure that that we get it to work, not just most of the time, but all of the time. And that involves bringing a lot of those experts that really know structures or really know electrical and making sure they're all on the same page before we send it up.
Nice, great answer. Yeah, in fact, my dad was also in the same state. He was choosing between, I think it was mechanical engineering and chemical engineering. In the end, he chose, he really liked materials science and engineering. His undergraduate was a mechanical engineering, and then he decided to pursue a graduate in material science. And then he decided, and then in the end, he became a process engineer. He really enjoyed the job and like how, like you said, the different subsystems with the different sub teams, like the electrical, different roles in engineering, and then they really combine together and make something great.
Yeah.
So great answer.
Thanks.
And then Mr. Howland.
Yeah, so I actually started on more of a similar track to Jacob. So I studied aerospace engineering in undergrad, and then I spent a couple of years working at a relatively small satellite company. Went to graduate school for space systems engineering. And then Jacob and I were coworkers for a handful of years at Lockheed Martin. And after about 4 years there, a couple of my coworkers had made a change from satellites to this small surgical robotics company. And I was kind of intrigued. And, I hadn't really done robotics ever as a profession. I'd only done it as a student and then as a mentor for several years. And I thought, hey, this seems like a cool opportunity to do something different. I've been doing the aerospace thing for a while. It's enjoyable, but I kind of want to branch out and learn some new things. And that seemed like a really good chance to do so. And I just kind of felt confident that, hey, if it doesn't work out, I could probably go back if I really needed to. So I was able to sort of make this same leap to this new company. So that was called Verb Surgical. We've since been acquired by Johnson & Johnson. But yeah, I'd say for me, the things that really motivated me to get into this field were, well, it started with my first robotics team. They got me excited about engineering. And I was also on the fence between mechanical and aerospace. And I did make the decision to do aerospace, but I kind of felt like I could sort of do either one if I wanted to. I'd say right now I kind of do neither one. My main role is really just, it's a lot of troubleshooting. It's a lot of like process development. How can we gather the key information that we need for this system? But yeah, learning to debug a system, especially like in real time, you're doing a procedure and you need to figure out what's going wrong, so that the surgeon can continue to get valuable information out of your system. Or if you're doing satellite testing, figuring out, okay, which subsystem is causing the problem, how is it supposed to operate, how is it not supposed to operate, and what is the information that can get me from where it's failing to working again. That I think is like a huge skill that you learn through first, and I think it's been one of my most like valuable assets in my career.
Great answer. So I have a quick question. So what were the aspects of aerospace engineering that you guys like over mechanical engineering?
I kind of thought it was similar, except the things you build can fly, which turns out, if you study just mechanical, you could do like a lot more purely in that you can't do if you do aerospace, because you also have to learn about like electrical and signals and systems and software. So, I'm sure I would have learned different things. I still would have had a very full like experience as a mechanical engineer. It just, maybe it was kind of like Jacob. It was almost like a flip of a coin.
Yeah,
Well,
I went back to school for a master's a couple years ago in mechanical engineering, because I wanted a little more. So aerospace engineering, how does everything work together? You get like kind of not as just under a surface level view of everything. Mechanical, I feel like you really go down to like a piece part, like how do I make the perfect screw? And I wanted a little more of that like detail, and so I went back to school to kind of learn that. Yeah, there was something else I was going to say, but I forgot, so I'll just leave it.
Well, it's kind of interesting you guys mentioned that, because actually when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I had contemplating doing mechanical engineering also. And so it was a choice between electrical and mechanical. So and then it's interesting that, my first jobs were actually doing embedded software. So, when one thing nice about robotics is they use all three disciplines.
Great answers. So we're moving on to the next question. What do you enjoy most about your career? And is there anything that you don't like? We'll start off with Mr. Wolff.
All right. So I think, my statement earlier about puzzles is kind of the biggest thing. It's figuring the puzzle out, whatever that happens to be. Designing something in hardware, writing code, helping customers solve their problems. They're all puzzles. And, what do I not like? Zoom meetings, maybe. All of us are probably a little tired of Zoom meetings. But seriously, when, even though meetings can be tedious, and you just want to act to get things done, but a lot of times that communication in the team is really crucial, right? Making sure that everybody's on the same page. We're all sort of heading for the same goals, and that's not always the case. And so a lot of those meetings are used to really clarify and make sure that everybody's heading in the right direction. And another facet that I truly, truly enjoy is the education piece. It's answering questions for customers. It's educating them as to what our product does and how it accomplishes that. And then that's exactly, the joy, the true joy that I get out of FIRST Robotics and mentoring. I've always said, if being a teacher paid well, like engineering does, I'd be a teacher. There's no question in my mind of that. I love educating. I love the questions. I love teasing out, what is it that this person doesn't quite understand? What do I need to say differently in order to hone that message so that they do understand it? That's a real joy. And so I get to get my fill of education by being a mentor in FRC, and get to have a good salary by being an engineer.
All right. Next up will be Mr. Howland.
Oh yeah, can you remind me of the exact question?
So what do you enjoy the most about your career, and is there anything that you don't like?
I'd say there's two things that I really enjoy. One is the potential of the system that I'm working on to make a huge difference in the lives of patients in the future. Because, you know, our system in particular, I mean, it's not public yet, but it's going to be very exciting once it hits the market for us. And I think it's going to really change a lot of lives. And so that's you know, there's really a lot of potential, and being able to work on a system as it's in development. And I haven't been able to do it yet, but at some point I'll be able to point in the, you know, in the real world and say, you know, I worked on this, I helped make this happen. And I think I'm really excited for that day. And then I'd say the other thing that I really like is just the people that I work with. And I think regardless of where you go, you want to be in an environment, you want your coworkers and your managers, and you want people that you can trust, people that you enjoy, you know, just spending time with. You know, and if my 5 favorite people from the company all decided to leave, I would probably leave too. Because, you know, it's really about the people that you're with, and if you enjoy working with them, it really makes a huge difference in your motivation to go to work. So I'd say those are the 2 things that I really enjoy. As far as things I don't like, I don't know if there's anything in particular. I mean, obviously there's a lot of process that goes along with being in a medical field, and also a lot of process that goes in being with in the aerospace field. And, you know, sometimes it can just take a long time to get your system to market or into space. And it seems like, okay, sometimes you want to just like go, but it's like, okay, we have to follow like a lot of steps to get there. And it can feel like, oh, we're almost there, but then we have to go through like 3 months of proving that we are really a safe system, whether you're going into a patient or going into orbit.
Very interesting. And would you like to go next, Mr. Labonville?
Sure. So in my career, you know, I started out, I mentioned I was doing embedded software. That was for semiconductor automatic test equipment. And, you know, I really liked the electrical and mechanical aspects of things too. And, you know, robotics was kind of my passion, even though I was doing very good work doing that. And so as I progressed, I got into robotics. I worked in a semiconductor robotics company, and we developed some new things. That was a startup company. And then I went to Intuitive Surgical. And so there's some interesting parallels with Mr. Howland, because, you know, Intuitive makes a surgical robot. We've essentially invented it. And, you know, it's really satisfying, especially listening to patients and seeing how your machine that you built actually saved their life, or made you know, the procedure that may have been difficult otherwise comfortable for them, and they cured their disease and things like that. So there's a lot of job satisfaction there. And then from a technical perspective, you know, the robotics, you know, I've been in the industry for over 25 years. And so it's one of those things that it's just really neat technology. And it's nice, you know, being in the with the FRC, you know, showing that to kids, trying to explain how it works and all that. I remember on the first question, I forgot to say what my role at the Janksters is. I've been there, this is my 4th year. I started when my daughter joined the team. She's going to be graduating this year, but I've been essentially doing lots of different things in the electrical and the mechanical areas. And the one area that I haven't done yet is the software, and Mr. Wolff is actually going to help me get up to speed in that, so I can really be competent in all the technologies. So, you know, again, I really like the robotics. I also, like Mr. Howland mentioned, you know, working with your team, there's a lot of good people there, you know, in all the different disciplines. Everybody needs to work together and coordinate things. It's a very complex system, as was mentioned before on some of the space systems and things like that. A surgical robot is also very complex, and people's lives are at stake. And there is a lot of process. There's a lot of verification and things like that. So you'd mentioned, you know, what things don't you like? Overall, I think I like it all. but there are a lot of meetings, like Mr. Wolff indicated, Zoom, you lose some of the, being there and actually hands-on working with the people. And then there's a lot of status meetings and how's the project going and things like that. And they all are absolutely necessary. Everybody needs to be coordinated to get something that is really successful. But, for people that like technology, that's probably less of the fun stuff, but it's all necessary to make something good.
Nice. And finally, Mr. Mintz.
Yeah, all three of them had little pieces that I 100% agree with. Things that I really like about my job, some of them are less about the job itself. One thing I like about Lockheed Martin in particular is our hours are pretty strict but flexible. So we have to work a certain number of hours a week, and as long as we get to our meetings on time and as long as we get our work done, that's totally okay. And for me, that allows me on the weekends to go explore the mountains, which is something I really like doing. And it also keeps us sane. There's a certain level of comfort that, Lockheed Martin and especially my managers, like Steve was saying, the people you work with make a huge, huge difference. Have been really kind in making sure, I wanted to learn more. I wanted to go back to school, and they were really accepting of that. And they really made sure that, if my workload was a little overwhelmed and I needed to do school stuff, they let me do that. And when I could get back to work, they made sure I had stuff to do and I could help work with that. So that was really, really cool. But I guess one of the things I like a little bit less that Mr. Labonville, I don't know how to say it.
Labonville, it's close enough.
Was saying that with systems engineering, you're looking at the whole thing. You can't really point to any one part of a satellite or an airplane and say, I made that thing, because your hands are you kind of have fingerprints all over it. But there are other people I work with that are like doing the true engineering work. They can point to a box on the satellite and say, that box would not be there if not for me, because I know everything about that box. And so that's kind of just a slightly different position at my work that I am hoping to kind of get towards one day. But right now, I just kind of have my hands over a lot of little things. But yeah, I really like teaching. I think one of the other things that working at a big company like this allows me to do is to do a lot of STEM outreach, which I find really, really satisfying, which is what Mr. Wolff was saying. That, yeah, I may not be able to, have a box on the satellite that I can point to, but, I can point to the team and say like, hey, I got to help with all these little like design a mechanism, and like we're working through things together. And I find that really, really enjoyable. So yeah.
Nice, nice. The next question is, what do you do in your career on a day-to-day basis? And we'll start off with Mr. Howland.
I think I'm lucky in that I get to do a handful of different things. And it can really vary a lot depending on the day. So for right now, like I'm going into work probably 3 days a week. We've got some developmental systems that we're bringing up sort of in a test phase. We've got some other clinical style laboratories where we're working directly with clinical engineers and surgeons. And then we've also got kind of more developmental work on some of our hardware and software and like data processing. So I kind of get to do a whole bunch of different things, and it's really, okay, what's the highest priority? Do we have surgeons coming in? Are the systems working right now? Do we need to troubleshoot issues? So it's absolutely very dynamic. And but there's enough room that I can say, hey, if I want to help, if I want to develop my own skill in a particular area, I can ask my manager and she'll work with me to, target my next assignment to be more in a certain area than another one.
Very interesting. Yeah, I also happen to follow that similar thing because I'm interested in the hardware, the building, the math and science, and also like the coding. And for example, you want to really build these together. And I believe that engineering is the thing that shows that. Like, for example, sometimes like when you write a program, you could be writing it for Google. And yes, there are a lot of, and the best part about that is not just the website, but just the actual device. You get to see it happen. Mm-hmm. And yeah. Next, Mr. Wolff.
Yeah. On that topic of seeing it happen, this is one of the reasons I think that robotics is a great place for learning software. A lot of times when you're learning software, if you're just learning it from a classroom and from a book, it's very abstract, right? You can input a number and you can have it calculate something, and yeah, right. But when you actually get to see a motor move, and when you get to see feedback from a system and a sensor, and you get to see the data from that, I think there's something very exciting about that, or not. Right. Again, right. You may find out this isn't for you and this isn't what you like. But when you find out that excites you, right, and that you want to dig and find more, that's engineering, right? So in my day-to-day, I'm a solutions architect these days. So I don't really write code in my day job. I only do that for when I'm doing cool maker stuff. But I spend a lot of time making drawings. I always tell everybody at work, all you pay me for is to do boxes and lines. That's all I do. And it's said tongue in cheek, but the boxes and lines are very important. They're a simple illustration of a complex problem, and they're the moment that you get to put something on paper and then put words around it. And then whether it's in a presentation form or it's in a project design document form that is going to live beyond the length of the project to help people stay on the same page, that these are the things that then I get to help educate the customer with, right? So I can put that in front of them and say, here's where the session manager is, and here's the way it communicates across your network, and here's the protocols it uses, and be pointing at different lines and boxes to be able to facilitate that discussion. And so a lot of what I do is documenting clearly and concisely, a lot of writing, a lot of technical writing, which if you had said in college or high school, is this going to be something that would excite you at all or be your career? I would have said, no way. I wasn't a great writer. I just, no way, right? That's just not me. But as time has gone on, I have certainly seen not only just the value in it, but my own personal value that I hold in it. And spending, I'll spend 4 or 5 hours a day writing, and then kind of polish that up into a document, and then send it on its way, right? And now there's 8 or 9 people who get to consume that and ask me a bunch of questions, and maybe I iterate it 2 or 3 times before it finally goes to a customer, or before it goes to the archives to say, this is what we have done for this customer and the way that it works, the theory of operation, those types of things. So it's all of that facilitates the communication with the customer, as well as with internal to the organization that I work with.
Very cool. And then Mr. Labonville.
So I manage a group of engineers, and so it depends on the phase of the project that we're in. So developing a surgical robot, we've already developed 4 generations, and we're obviously going to be working on the next generation. So when it's early on, there's a lot of discussions with other groups defining what the what the customer needs and what we're going to try for. Then there's a matter of architecting the system, both the electronics, the software that goes with it, other IP, the mechanical, and all the rest of it. My group also works very closely with the mechanical engineers, embedding circuit boards into the mechanisms. And so there's a lot of collaboration there as well. So there are regular meetings to discuss those sorts of things. Because I manage a group, I also have one-on-one meetings with each of the guys in my group, as well as we have these core team meetings for different aspects of the project. When we get to the part where we're because it's a medical device, there's a lot of verification that needs to be done. So we have to write the protocols. We have to look at failure modes analysis. That's a big part of it. what you have to dream up, what could possibly go wrong, and then figure out, okay, if this happens, how are we going to mitigate that and, adjust the risk and things like that. So there's a lot of that. Then there's a lot of documentation, and you need to have a full set of documentation. Our product is FDA approved, so they scrutinize everything to make sure everything is good before you can actually get it to the field. So it's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of talking with people. There's set times where there's creative. What can we do, and how can we do it better? What wasn't so good about the last generation that we want to make better? And then there's also some innovative ideas. I've been involved in those as well. We're really big on getting patents, and so there's part of that as well. Just applying for patents on things that you think are novel.
Amazing, amazing. Yes, I believe that engineering is always, you learn more, you find what you could have done better, and then you always keep improving. That's what we see in everyday's devices, electronics, and even the chair that I'm sitting on right now. What could happen in the future? Like, what if there's a self-serve food or something, or what could you add another function? And then yes, of course you have to have a lot of documentation, because when people want to build it, they need to know what's going on. And Mr. Mintz, would you like to say something?
Yeah. So my day-to-day is a lot of organizing information. So we have, hundreds and hundreds of requirements that we have to fill. And for each requirement, there's someone who's a technical expert in how we're going to go about meeting that requirement. And so a big part of my job is, making sure we're tracking every single requirement and how we're going to do it. And do we have the right documentation? Do we have the right tests? And my most productive days are the days that I talk to a lot of people. There is a lot of time where I'm sitting and I have to, do my own spreadsheet and, move information around and write down how we're going to do things. But yeah, again, the most productive part is when I'm talking to the expert in the thing that I want to write down about, and they can give me some information or some insight into how this is going to affect someone else, and then I go talk to that person. And getting those people together is one of the most important parts of my job.
Very interesting. And was it Mr. Howland?
I think I already went.
Oh, all right. All right. Did all you guys go?
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the next question. So looking back now, is there anything that you wish you had known before entering your career? And are there any particularly important skills to have for your career? And we'll start off with Mr. Howland.
That's a tough one. It's interesting being in a medical field without having a medical background. Because they'll talk about the procedures that they're doing or planning for. They'll talk about, all the different approval levels, and, I kind of wish I had more of the biomedical background, or just a little bit more familiarity with it, just so I could be more knowledgeable about these when I'm in those conversations. But it's just not really the path that I in particular took. So I guess I'd just say that for now.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of even though you might select a specific industry along the way, you'll have a lot of new skills and new technologies to work with. Like, for example, my father, he was a process engineer, and then later moving on, he learned how to use Excel, and then this was the age of computing. This was, for example, I know a lot of family friends who started out as electrical engineers, and later on, electrical engineering became very correlated with software. So they decided to, on the way, learn some new code. There was back then very old software, but now back then there was BASIC and I think it was C, Fortran, and then later on people really had to adapt to the modern coding. I would say, for example, from the punch cards to the actual screen. And next up is Mr. Wolff.
All right. So in terms of things that I wish I had known before entering my career, I'm kind of drawing a blank. I don't know. I think for me, the discovery has been so much of the fun that I think if somebody had told me the way it was going to go up front or more about it, it kind of would have ruined it. For me, you know, every time that you make a job change, and even sometimes during a particular job at a particular company, you're hopefully building new skills and learning new things, and that serves you well in that job, and maybe gets you ready for your next one. And you don't quite know what that's going to be. I certainly didn't design my path. It designed me. But in terms of skills, listening intently. I think that especially when you're a seeker of knowledge and you do a lot of reading to get that knowledge, and then you want to tell others about it, I think you spend less time listening as sort of almost a natural consequence of that. And maybe that's just me. But I think in terms of skills, listening, even when you think you know the answer, listen deeply, and then respond. Listening is probably one of the most important skills in communicating, and I think it's a bit underrated. And when you're talking with customers about what their issues are, what their problems are, and how you're going to solve them, if you're just spending time talking, then you're really not, you know, they're going to notice. Is kind of what it comes down to. And if instead they walk away from that meeting and say, wow, they really listened to me, and they really echoed back to me what it was that my issues were and how they were going to solve it. And the answer may be, I don't know. And I don't know is generally usually a pretty darn good answer, so long as it's followed up with, I'll go find out. Right. And so I do that too.
Very interesting. Yes, also applies to school a lot. Like, for example, when a teacher asks you a question and you want them to jump on the answer, but then you forget to read a small part of the mathematical equation, or you forget to find out that there's this law that's applied.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. Yes, I agree. Listening, very crucial skill. Next up is Mr. Labonville.
Well, I don't, you know, like Mr. Wolff, I don't know that I can identify something I wish I would have known. It's been a, you know, wild adventure. You know, I was thinking about what you were talking about, the different languages. You know, my first computer was an Apple II Plus, you know, so that's, you know, the second computer Apple ever made. I did have to learn Fortran on punch cards in school. I had programmed with BASIC even in high school. And then we used Pascal, which maybe you know or don't know, and then C, and then C++. And, you know, it's nice that C++ is still around because, you know, I knew that language pretty well. And that's what we use at the Janksters use. I don't know if, you know, the other teams, which programming language you guys use, but it seems to make a lot of sense, and it's the best way to really get good control over it. But, you know, as I was going through my career, you know, as technologies changed or things came into existence that didn't before, you know, learning those and being able to adapt to them, you know, another thing that didn't exist when I went to school was FPGAs, you know, where you can essentially design your circuit by coding. And, you know, the intuitive surgical robots make good use of FPGAs as well. You know, one of the things that Mr. Wolff was also talking about is the skill of listening. But another one that I like dealing with other people is realizing they're people. And most people, at least that I've run across in professional environments, they really want to contribute. They want to do a good job. They want to have their ideas heard and make a difference. And, it's not necessarily money that's driving people. There are a few that do that, but I think most of the things that drive the people that I'm familiar with is the want to be valuable to others, to make a contribution, things like that. And treating people as, like you'd want to be treated. The golden rule is really good, where you give somebody respect and you give them the responsibility they're going to want to achieve, and that's where people become quite productive and happy in their career.
Yes, yes, I agree with that a lot. Also, we use Java to code our robots. I mean, there's a big difference between, there's very similar languages, but instead like C++ is a little bit oriented around like the memory storage, and sometimes it can get very confusing. So we use Java, and these are the two best languages to code because these are object-oriented programming, which is like oriented around objects. And so there's a lot of objects on a robot. So you got to take that into consideration. And then next, I believe, is Mr. Mintz.
Yeah, so I already forgot the question. I was ready to answer.
Oh, it's all right. It's so looking back now, is there anything
Yes.
that you believe you should have known before you're entering your career? And are there any particularly important skills for your career?
Sure. So since we deal a lot with FRC students, my advice is more geared towards college. I'd say things that I tell students often is everyone is taking largely the same classes, and those classes may be hands-on to some extent, but you will do a lot more learning in the clubs that you join, and you'll get a lot more out of the clubs that you join, and they'll set you apart a lot more than the classes that you take. And so that's something I wish I had done more of in college. I was part of a super mileage team where they made, a little car that goes, 6 or 10 miles on literally milliliters of gas. It was a really cool concept, but I was more focused on classes and I didn't really spend much time with them, and I really wish I had. So that'd be one of my biggest pieces of advice to myself or to students. In terms of job and skills, I think one of the big things is being okay with asking questions, even if it sounds like a dumb question, which is very similar to the listening skill is, but there's a lot of humility involved, a lot of being humble, because you may be in the same position for a long time and it's something that you think, I should know this. I don't want to look dumb when I ask this question. But I guarantee that it's better to find out the right answer than to do the wrong thing or go off and spend 3 hours working on a spreadsheet that may not have been important or may have been the wrong thing at the time, or just go off and I think asking questions, even when you think you should know the answer, is a pretty valuable skill. And that applies in FRC too. There are things where, I may not always remember exactly how to use the mill. And so I'll go to our chief FRC mentor, and it can be really scary going up to him and asking that question. But I would much, much rather know the right answer than take a chance at getting hurt or doing it wrong or breaking something. And so that's a really valuable skill to have. And that applies to my job as well.
Nice, nice. Yes, yes. That is definitely, because you learn a lot of things in your life. Not just of course mostly the math and the science and engineering. Sometimes you have to take some other general education classes, which you may not enjoy much, but you will overall in time, there's different phases where you'll be learning specific fields, and you might become a little rusty with things in the past, like especially with math. Like, for example, you work a lot with algebra, and now back then you were working very good at arithmetic, but sometimes the arithmetic skills, like honestly, I forgot how to subtract using like the standard method, but I'm very good with mental math. And yeah. So what you said earlier about the asking question thing is also very important, because sometimes there are people in my class who are a little shy to ask, but in the end it's very beneficial. And some other classmate who may be shy to ask, they will learn too. Like, in the end, so just sacrificing some potential humility for asking a question is overall super beneficial. All right. The next question is there anything that you've learned in the workplace that can be applied to robotics teams? And is there anything that you have learned from FIRST that can be applied to your job? And this is the last question. We'll start off. Would you like to go first, Mr. Labonville?
Sure. Actually, FRC and there's been a close relationship with Intuitive Surgical. Intuitive sponsors quite a few of the FRC teams, and it teaches a lot of good skills. One of the things, I've had summer interns for quite a few years, and one of the things that actually really helps in choosing an applicant is, guys that have gone through FRC. FRC teaches teamwork. It teaches hands-on practical things. I had mentioned I worked on car electronics when I was going to college, and the actual skills to really build things is really important. At work, my engineers, they actually hands-on design, debug, all the rest of it. There's a lot of troubleshooting, and so there's a lot of skills in troubleshooting and working with other teams, and that's exactly what FRC gives you. So I think there's a very close relationship between that. One of the things that's interesting, in FRC, they didn't have that when I was young, but they're making a competition robot, and I actually got into the robot industry because of a competition robot that I had built. I actually have it right here. This thing I built in just about 3 months for a competition I had heard about. And I actually competed against another guy that had a pretty decent machine that had got involved in a startup robot company, and that's how I got into the robot industry. So for me personally, competition robots was my key into semiconductor robots, which then led to medical robots. And so again, I think the hands-on aspect of it, the teamwork, working with the different disciplines in technology, that's all very important in what we do, and and also in the FRC teams.
Mr. Howland, would you like to go next?
Sure. So in terms of things learned from the workplace to apply to robotics teams, I'd kind of say you need a bare minimum of meetings, or at least a bare minimum. I'd say there's been times on robotics teams where you just want to just get in the lab and start doing things. The shooter team wants to do this, the drivetrain team wants to do this, and software wants to go and do this. And everyone just wants to start doing things and, building pieces and whatnot, but they don't really know how all these pieces are going to fit together. And if you'll end up with like, okay, we got the ball to this point to the shooter, and the shooter team's, okay, well, we expected it to be here, and we can't lift it into our shooter from there. So it's, yeah, we've had instances just like that. And it's like, an aspect of that is like the problems often arise at the boundaries between two different teams, whether that's two different mechanical teams, or like the software team, the electrical team, or two different software teams where they were expecting like a particular type of measurement data to come in these units, and the other team thought it was going to be in these units. And then because of that, you end up with, instead of driving straight and delivering the gear onto the peg, you turn right and you hit a wall. Because the CV team thought you were in meters and the other team thought you were in feet. So those are things that, you might learn the hard way either in robotics or or at the workplace. Things I've learned from FIRST that I can apply to my job. I mean, kind of everything. Troubleshooting is a huge aspect of it. Something that I like to do as a mentor is like making sure that the student gets actually start on the thing that that I'm helping them with. And something that I also do at work is make sure that if somebody comes and asks for help, you don't just kind of wave them in the direction of where they need help. You don't say, oh, it's on a shelf over there, or, oh, go run this command in the terminal. I like to help bring somebody like all the way to the thing that they need and kind of go that extra mile with them and actually be the really helpful person. Because that's what I wish somebody would do for me if I was in that same situation. Because otherwise they're just going to get stuck at the next thing. Then they'll feel like they already asked me for help, and then they'll just like, bang their head against the wall for 10 minutes being like, how do I do this next thing? So I always try to go that extra mile, both at robotics and at work. And I think it really helps both them have a good impression of me as well as move the entire team forward.
Yeah, very nice. So that if there's in robotics, especially there's a kind of not a hierarchy. I wouldn't say hierarchy, but there is a specific order. Of course, planning is in front of everything. Like I know the planning is a little boring, but then you really need the planning to do well during the building phase. And then so there's first the mechanical, and then the electrical, and then the software. They're kind of a little bit relying on each other. And there's some other sub teams that can function like without the help of each other. And of course, each sub team needs their help, but like sometimes the functions of robots are dependent on another one. And for example, oh yes, for example, when you're coding a program, like for example, I was coding this program I think it was last week, and it's always good to seek out help. Like I always seek out help from the internet or a friend who has done it before. And I was thinking, well, this could be achieved through myself, but if you're by yourself, you have basically an experience, like you don't really have much experience with it. And I did eventually get the program to work, but if I really took the time to look other things online, I think I would not have spent 3 months creating it, when my friend spent that same program in a different language in 2 weeks. Next up is Mr. Wolff.
Yeah, so for me, I think workplace to robotics, the big thing for me is education, teaching, mentoring. It's all part of what I do at work, and it's all part of what I love about robotics, is to teach a bit and then listen to what the student's getting and what they're not getting, what they're struggling with, and then pose questions and help tease them along the path, right? So what else could this be, right? And maybe then give them a better hint a minute later if they're really frustrated with it. Because ultimately, just telling them the answer, right, isn't so helpful. Having them truly struggle a little bit, right, really does help to gain a deeper understanding and an appreciation for things, and helps them to explore the options. Something that I take not just back to work from robotics, but that I've taken to life from robotics, is that I tell students and mostly parents of students in the beginning of the season that students first year and they won't get this, and second year they might get this, and by third year and fourth year they do get this. It's not about the robot. It's about teamwork. It's about communication. It's about deadlines. It's about the project. It's about sticking with it until you make it work. It's about gracious professionalism. These are all the things, right? And this is life, right? This isn't just robotics. It's not about the robot. The robot's really cool. The competition's really cool, but that's just a hook in the mouth, right? The real deal is it's not about the robot. So that's what I take back from FRC.
Yeah, very good. A very good answer. And I believe our last one is Mr. Mintz.
That's pretty hard to follow up. That really put everything really into like, we'll pretend that was at the end, okay, and pretend that I went before you. The thing that that from the workplace is very similar to what Steve was saying. You know, I think being a systems engineer, where every day I'm looking at how do these pieces interact, that someone designed is working on designing, using all their expertise. How does that interact with the other thing, and how are we doing on a schedule? And you know, the question I ask pretty often in our RoboShack is like, when is this due? How's it coming? And have you talked to the other team about how it's going to interact with them? And they're like, no. And I'm like, all right, well, why don't we go talk to them? And like getting them to interact. And that's a lot of what I do at my job. And I think that translates pretty well to FRC. From FRC to my job, though, one thing that, especially when you're working on a really big program, you're working on a spaceship, and you're kind of a low-level person like me, there's a little less creativity. There's like it's already really been designed, and you're implementing the design. You're making sure every little piece works in the design. And so you get a little less of the creative side of it. There's still little problems to solve. There's little opportunities there. But it's really cool in FRC to be able to flex those creative juices and muscles and like start from the ground up and say, all right, we have this big task and we have to figure out a bunch of little ways of solving it that all meld into one single robot that achieves that task. And so that's really cool to be able to go to FRC, flex those muscles, and then go back into the workplace and be like, hey, like maybe there are better ways that we can do this process, or you know, do this thing, or you know, take something totally wildly different that I would not have thought of before. And then let's pretend that Mr. Wolff said his thing. Yeah, even in our, for the Gold Strikers 2473, our big motto that's on all of our stickers and all our buttons is building robots, building people. And it's really about the building people. The robots is only a tiny part of it. It's the connections you make. It's working as a team, solving problems, being creative, having something that you're all working towards the same thing, and getting to see that in action and see how you stack up. And be just satisfied that like you made a thing that wasn't there before, that did not exist, and now it's there.
Nice. So yeah, I really like that aspect, like about I think this aspect's a little different, but it's like about like sometimes like general knowledge. Like for example, when you take an engineering degree, you learn lots of math, like a lot. And in the end, my dad, when he took his engineering degree, he learned a lot of math and physics. And then in the end, he just used probably something that he could have done since elementary school. But it's very good. Great. It's great to learn, to know all that, because eventually he eventually taught it to me and my sister. And then eventually because in the end, in the future, we don't know what our path could be. We could be like an aerospace engineer, a mechanical engineer, and there's different disciplines of like problem solving in that. And with this general knowledge, you can really apply it and then spread it out, teach other people. And I think I was going to say something, but I forgot.
Well, one thing that you were saying, which I kind of agree with, is there are classes that are required to get an engineering degree that you may or may not ever use again. And a lot of people think, well, why do I need to do that? What it's actually teaching you, and being successful in school, is teaching, that you can actually take a path and know how to think, learn for yourself, be adaptable. And so it's not what you're learning, but it's how you're learning. And that type of thing then gets specialized into wherever you go into. I remember when I was, I said that I was trying to decide between mechanical and electrical engineering. For the electrical engineers, the thermodynamics course was simpler than the mechanical engineers had to take. But, I remember a lot of electrical engineers complaining, why do I have to learn this stuff, right? But having a good overall view of how things work, whether you're going to use it or not, it really helps in refining what you're going to be doing in your career.
Yeah. Well, it really it makes sense, like for an electrical engineer, to, like to probably take easier thermodynamics, especially like when you're working with a lot of chemistry, you're gonna need a lot of thermodynamics. And yes, there is quite a lot of chemistry classes in computer engineering, but it's mostly knowing about like the properties of the material you're making the computer with, and how am I gonna make this electrically conductible and stuff. And yeah, I really like your answer. All right, so that's all the questions. And oh yeah, Mr. Labonville. So would you like to demonstrate your Da Vinci robot?
Okay, yeah, there was one of the things that we were talking about. Since this is we're talking about robotics, it's kind of interesting to see what professional robots look like and things like that. So there is. Let me find the. I've got a few things here. I had mentioned that there's been 4 generations of the Da Vinci, and it's interesting how they evolved. This top one, we called it. This was the original Da Vinci, and it's also called the Da Vinci Classic. And this came out in 1999. And you can see what the different pieces look like. There's in a surgical robot, there are 3 main components. This one we call the surgeon console, the vision cart, and the patient side cart. The patient cart is what actually holds the surgical instruments that goes into the patient. The vision cart is typically close to the patient also. It contains like camera equipment, but it also contains other things like electrosurgical energy, which are used for the patient. There's a monitor you can see. Back then, this was a CRT monitor on top of a 19-inch rack, essentially. And there was the surgeon console where the surgeon sits. In going to the second generation, you can kind of look at and see the similarities and the differences. In the surgeon console, it's actually very similar. There was some electrical architectural changes, but physically, from the outside, it looks very similar. The vision cart was also similar. We went to an LCD a monitor here, but it was still an industrial 19-inch rack. And it held similar types of equipment. The camera controllers and things like that were purchased. The patient cart, though, is significantly different. The original one, there's actually 4 giant cables with 150 pin connectors on them going between the patient cart and the surgeon console, and all the motion control was done inside the surgeon console here, and just cabled over to the patient cart. In the next generation, the motion controllers were actually located inside here, and there's a communication path between the carts, and so it actually made things a lot more reliable. So remember, I had talked about, you find out what didn't work so well and what did work. I joined the company just as this one was going to be introduced. So when I started this, the first one was the only one there. The second one had been designed but not released to the public yet. Then I was involved in all the generations since. If you look at going between the second and third generation, the similarities and differences, now you look at the surgeon console, it looks way different. And in this generation, we actually provided a capability where you could actually have 2 surgeon consoles operating on the same patient. That way you can have a surgeon and an experienced surgeon and somebody that's learning, or you can have 2 surgeons that are assisting each other. The patient cart is, from the outside, looks almost identical. There were some internal electronic improvements, but from the outside, it looked almost identical. The The vision cart, though, was enhanced quite a bit. In this generation, we actually made our own camera systems, where before they were purchased. And the industrial design was a little bit nicer. Instead of being an industrial 19-inch rack, it looks a little bit nicer. And then in the fourth generation, the surgeon consoles look almost identical. In fact, you know, the color is different, and that's about it. The vision cart, there's some similarities, but we also added our own electrosurgical unit, which is what makes the energy for doing some of the surgeries. But the patient cart is quite different. The new one, so here again, we found the shortcomings of the existing system. And one of them is it's kind of hard to set up, especially there's some surgeries where you want to come from underneath, but then you want to come from above the patient. And rearranging it mid-surgery was a little bit complicated with the original design. And so in the new design, this whole area here rotates. And so you can actually quickly detach the robot arms, turn the robot around, rehook them up, and you're ready to go. So those are kind of the 4 generations that are out there. There is also, let me find a couple other fun things. Here is, here's kind of a fun video that's on YouTube. This one is, this was on the 3rd generation system. I don't know if how well this is going to work. So will you guys tell me how, can you hear the sound and can you see the motion clear enough? Okay. So that was, this was on our 3rd generation machine. And one of the things, you know, the original robots, they have 4 different arms and 4 different entry points into the body. This was a way of using that type of robot to get through a single incision. Typically, it's in the belly button or something like that. And so there is less trauma, and when you're done, there's hardly any visible scarring or anything like that. So let me find something else here. Let me show you this right here. So I don't know how well you can see this picture, but in our 4th generation, there's actually 3 different versions of the patient cart. And one of them is the what we call the single port. And so it is something that was trying to be achieved with that one robot, but it actually does it, it's made for only going in at one place. So here is a little video of that guy in action. So here there's the camera. It goes in and looks around, and this is this model right here is essentially a model of a mouth. So if you're going to be doing surgery, like tongue cancer or other issues that you can have there. And so that's kind of an overview of kind of the robots that we make. And, again, FRC is very, there's a lot of synergy between what FRC is teaching and real life robotic systems. And I think Mr. Howland can probably testify on some of that stuff as well, the robots you guys are making.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So very interesting, great answers from today, all of you. I'm very proud that you were able to get through all these questions. I know it was sometimes hard to remember the questions with all of the things that we were going to prepare for. And before we go, are there any questions for each other?
Well, I guess, how soon can we get back to competing? But I don't know, these guys know, but that's, it's one of the things that I found out as, we collaborate with other teams, is that the other mentors and students, it's really interesting talking to them and seeing the paths that they took. I know at your team, there's guys that worked at Apple for a long time, and all kinds of very interesting things, and seeing the path that they took. And this, being in Silicon Valley, we're kind of inventing a lot of the stuff that's out in the world right now. Some of the stuff that Google does is absolutely amazing with the the search engines and the maps and a lot of the things that we kind of take for granted. When I was young, couldn't even imagine things like that. I think Star Trek did, with the communicators. The thing that I'm still waiting for, though, is the transporter, because if we could get that, then we could skip all the traffic and all the rest of it. But maybe one of these days.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I really hope there's going to be another robotics competition. Like, we've really, with this with these first challenges, I believe we got, like, especially the freshmen who are new to our team, and I really believe we got them to get the hands-on experience, so that when we move on to FRC, there'll be more hands-on, like more tech savvy. And yeah, I'm really excited for everything. Not just the more vaccines. I think. I mean, I'm actually a year away from the vaccine. I can't get it until in September. That's when my 16th birthday is. And yeah. So
well, you may be surprised. They're in third round trials for 12 to 16-year-olds,
yeah.
And I think you'll probably beat that September date. Would be my estimation.
Yeah, me too.
Nice. That's gonna be.
This was great. Thank you so much for hosting this and for coming up with questions and all that.
No problem.
Yeah, it was great meeting you, the people that I haven't met before. Hopefully we can meet in person and talk about other fun stuff.
Yeah, I look forward to next time we're at a competition. We'll definitely seek each other out.
Indeed.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, it was nice
shaking hands and stuff. Can you imagine?
I can't.
Elbow shake.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks. Signing off.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.